Chicago.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. I'm Nathan, your host for today's episode, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Jim Elliott and Tinamarie Hernandez of Diveheart. We're going to get into Diveheart a little bit and talk about the organization because it's one that I'm really excited about. But first, I want to welcome you, Jim and Tinamarie. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you very much for having us. We're excited to speak with you today.
yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Diveheart is a nonprofit that is building confidence, self-esteem, and independence in the lives of children, adults, and veterans with disabilities by teaching them scuba therapy and scuba diving, as well as other means. So it's an organization that is doing amazing work. It sounds super fun. Like scuba is just, who wouldn't want to go on a scuba expedition? So it's something that I'm sure feels like fun for you, but an organization that is doing some really important work with really important people. So we can't wait to dig into that. But first, I'd love for you to tell me about you and your Chicago story. So, are the two of you from Chicago? Did you move here later? Just tell me how you came to be a Chicagoan.
I was born and raised. I was born in Chicago. And then my parents moved us to the suburbs, but close western suburbs. And then I went to grad school in Denver. So I was away for about a decade, and then I returned. And so I've been back for it'll be 18 years this year. So the
Awesome.
majority of my life has been spent in Chicago.
Okay.
And I'm West Sider as well. I went to high school in Downers Grove, and then put myself through College of DuPage, and then Northern Illinois University, where I was recruited by the Chicago Tribune, and then went to WGN Radio and helped start up CLTV, and then left the
Wow.
media business to start Diveheart.
Yeah,
So
so
Yeah.
we met through Northern Illinois University. We both worked at the newspaper, and we met at an alumni event. So that's how that
so
happened.
we went to the same college, but Tina Marie will tell you it was different years.
I,
And I'm sure you were both were very studious and very, so you would have met in a library or something, right?
no, it was an alumni event. He finished with Northern well before I went.
Well, oh yeah, many decades.
Well, yeah, we're obviously glad that you did meet because you now started this amazing organization. Um, I love for people to tell me about Chicago as they remember it. So when you're growing up, can you tell me about like what Chicago was like, or what the Chicago region was like when you were growing up, and sort of how you remember being a kid around here?
Oh, well, what was great was I have a large family. So my mom was one of six, my dad was, one of 10. And so
Wow.
they were all over the Chicagoland area. So
Yeah.
I had aunts and uncles in Chinatown, and I had people in the Pilsen area, and I had, we were in the suburbs. And so because we were close knit family, we went to all these different places. And then in high
Yeah.
school, I remember, both my parents were from the city. They grew up in the city, and they were the only parents I remember having that were like, "Go into the city and go figure it out." So I was always the person in high school who was the only one allowed to drive into the city. So
Yeah.
we would do that and do some exploring. And I was made to feel like it, be careful, but explore and enjoy it. I've always loved going into the city. Um, when I was in college, I would do summers at a law firm that my one of my cousins was the managing director of. And
Okay.
I remember loving to take the train, and then I would walk from Union Station to where it was the Prudential building. So I'd have that nice 1 mile
Mm.
walk every day back and forth in the summers. And playing games of, let's take this street down. Let's go down this street.
Yeah.
Let's see if I
Yeah.
can walk all the way without catching a red light. So, it's something I've always been very proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember my parents said, "Be home before the street lights go on." I don't know if kids still have to do that, but and then it was just like out and about, just playing and doing that stuff, and we thought it was safe. to do that stuff, back then. I guess parents are a lot more protective now, but
Yeah.
yeah, kind of investigating the world around you as a young one. And my dad was an army vet with a disabilities, so I remember dodging wheelchairs at Heinz VA Hospital in Maywood, and grew up with a friend with cerebral palsy in grade school, and would walk him to school so the bullies wouldn't pick on him. And yeah, so it was just kind of you know getting to know the neighborhood, back then when you could do that freely.
Yeah. Tina Marie, I want to talk a little bit about your excursion outside of Chicago, because going to Denver, I've never been there, but I've heard amazing things and I would love to visit. But being away from Chicago and so much of your family, can you tell us about like what that was like for you and sort of how that helped shape you and what you learned from being away?
Oh, yeah. Well, Denver, there's a lot of transplants that live in Denver. So you don't
Okay.
find too many natives, people who were born and raised there. But what I found in Denver is, the people that are your friends, like the people that you choose to have as family,
Yeah, yeah,
and that was what my major support was during those 10 years, were people that I met and became friends with, who I'm friends with today, and who became very close to me. I had my son in Denver, so those were his first 8 years were in that city, and I love going back. It actually, my sister lives there now. She lives in Arvada, which is right north of Denver. So I get to go back every 3 months and visit because I want to be there for my nieces and nephews.
yeah.
Um, but it really, it's a beautiful city. It's a medium sized city, or it was at the time. And I remember feeling like it's a nice, comfortable sized city.
Yeah,
Chicago's bigger, but
yeah,
Chicago has that feeling as well. And I think it's because it's the neighborhoods. So you can actually, I'm a believer in taking big chunks and making it smaller, right? So you can
right.
you can have that fit and feel comfortable. And I did miss a lot of the Chicago food. I just read a meme how Chicago ruins us for food anywhere else in the world. I still like when I go back and visit, I have a certain set of things I need to bring with me food wise for the people who live there that they can't if they're not in Chicago. So
Yeah,
um, I appreciated Chicago, and the weather. You see a lot more blue sky, but I appreciate that Chicago has so much. It just has so much to offer. So I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
mind too much coming back.
You remind me of a time that my family went to Disney for a family trip, and so they none of them live in Chicago, so I flew down by myself a little later, and I get there and they're like, "Okay, we have dinner ready. Like, you don't have to get any food. Just come right from the airport to the condo." So I was like, "All right." So I'm excited. I just flown. I was tired. I was hungry. I get there and it's Giordano's pizza, and I was like, "Really?" But people love the Chicago food. So I was all right. Well, I'll eat pizza that I could have gotten a block away from me back home.
And now I do. I've been to Florida many times. I don't know what you. I don't think of Florida. Well, I guess any seafood would
Yeah,
be kind of Florida food. So
yeah. Jim, I'd love for you to share with me about um, so your work in the media, because I think that's really interesting, and um,
Mm.
what you saw there and sort of what you took away from there that would have helped you in starting your own nonprofit, but really just interacting with people, I think is the big thing. So what did you learn about your time in media?
Well, starting in the newspaper business was very interesting as a young journalist because
Hmm.
the approach, I'm really, really, we're both news junkies, and I love to like follow what's going on in the media and social media, which we didn't have when I was, in the late '70s when I was recruited by the Tribune, and there was a and once and there was a hierarchy, and I transitioned from writing, the journalist writing reporter side to advertising,
Okay.
and I was able to grow in that area. And it was, you started kind of like in the mailroom, even though the advertising folks typically were kind of like made more money and did better and
Hmm.
um, than the average employee. But it was interesting that was, you had to, it wasn't too long before I started there that that advertising sales executives had to like wear white gloves and hats, and they had all
Yeah.
sorts of rules, and
Hmm.
I had a beard in college and long hair, and they said, "Nope, you're getting rid of that." And so, and then the transition to broadcast to WGN radio was very opportune, because I started right before WGN got the rights to do the Chicago Bears games in
Okay.
1984. And then, of course, in 1985, the Bears won the Super Bowl. And it just was a ride. It was an unbelievable ride. Getting to know the Bears, getting to know Mike Ditka and Ray Meyer at the time, who was a big coach at DePaul University, and
Yeah.
getting to know them personally, riding on a bus with Walter Payton and
Wow.
listening to him make fun of Sean Gale, and holding a brick phone when the mobile phones were like this big, and
Yeah.
but it also gave me a lot. I had more theater clients than anybody else at the station, so I was able to give my family the experience of going to theater, to openings at the Schubert and the Goodman and different things, and just give people a lot of great experiences. So that was fun. And then transitioning to help the Chicagoland Television News was very cool too, because it was a synergy of all the Tribune properties. And I was able to, because I had been in newspaper and radio and had experience with the Cubs and the Bears and all these different entities that the company had. I was a natural fit for that and helped them
Yeah.
grow. And so that was very cool. And then I thought I got out of the business a little bit early, but it turns out what's
It was.
happened to the business and to
Yeah.
the Tribune
Yeah.
Company in particular. I got out just in time, really, and it gave me years to build my experiences working with people with disabilities and diving, and then starting Diveheart in 2001. So this is our 21st year. Um,
Wow.
And
yeah.
we still benefit from Jim's experience in the media for Diveheart, right? All the people he met.
Yep.
And it's always a big tease because anywhere we go in the city, Jim could be like, "Oh, they were one of my clients. Oh, they were one of my clients." And so it has been a very fruitful experience having him. I feel like his depth of being able to get to know people, being able to, solidify relationships and then go back to relationships that he had in the media business has been very good for Diveheart,
Yeah.
and it continues to be.
Yeah. It's always been, for me, it's like I'm not a great networker. I feel kind of weird talking about myself, and then it's like, what do I have that's interesting enough to tell these people that they would like want to connect with me? And I've learned over time that everyone's story has value, and that people are interested in hearing your story. And so I think that I've gotten a little better with that. But when you have those experiences and when you have that work experience with people and you see that carry over into other areas, it's really good because you really don't know who's going to give you something in this time that will be valuable later. And I think as young people go into work, they don't always realize like the people they're coming across, maybe the person sitting next to them on the train, maybe the person who's in the elevator every day with them because you all come at the same time and you leave at the same time. Um, can be valuable resources for you. And I think that's a great lesson in that is, just interact with people because you never know who is standing next to you, really.
Right. No, I think that is such a valuable lesson for people to know. And it's not sometimes always talking about like how do I introduce myself. What um I've learned, and partially what Jim has taught me is, approach everyone like, what are you about? Right. When you
Mm,
show interest in someone else, they a lot of times will reflect that interest back.
yeah.
So I did a project with my son when he was younger, and we went to all 50 states. And something that
Wow.
he's shared with me is that he goes, now anyone I meet ever, I can be like, oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
And that opens a conversation, right? But you can open a conversation, pretty much anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but he also had an experience that I think of, especially for young people, right? He's 26 now, but he and I love going to diners and going to various local places to eat. That was one of the rules wherever we went. You got to eat local,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So he goes to a diner, he sits next to a guy, starts talking to him. Guy's impressed with him somehow, and he goes, "Well, let me buy you let me buy you breakfast. He goes, and here's my card. And if you ever need a job, let me know. And so my son takes the card, goes home, looks him up, and he's like, oh, he's like a vice president of this company. And so again, there, you just never know who you're going to end up
Yeah.
next to, right? Just out of a casual conversation.
Yeah,
What's
absolutely.
what's interesting is, as a young reporter, I would do an interview with you, for example, to tell me more about what you do. And when I transitioned to advertising, I approached it not like I had to sell advertising. I approached it a business like I was a reporter.
Mm,
And I would say, who, what, when, where, why, how. I'd say, well, tell me about your business. Who's your customer? How do you reach them now? What
yeah.
do you do? And as I would learn more about them, we became friends because people love talking about their business and about themselves and about what they do. So once they shared a bunch with me, in my mind as they would talk, I was going already in different places. And then I would figure out how, if I was with WGN Radio, how my demographics and my station and the tools that I had, the Cubs and the Bears and stuff, how that might fit into their marketing strategy and advertising
Yeah.
strategy. But I developed some amazing friendships, and like Tina Marie says, to this day, I have people that, I mean, I called a friend the other day I hadn't seen in 20, 25, 30 years, and just boom, we struck it up like it was yesterday. It was crazy.
Yeah. Was when you were in media, was it super competitive? Because I always think of media being really competitive, and so it's like, was it super competitive? And then how did you kind of work with it? How did you deal with that?
Well, when I was in radio, it was funny because I'll never forget a meeting we had where we were the number one billing radio station in America. And that meant a lot of people wanted to work at our station. That they were lined up around the block to work at
Hmm.
WGN.
Hmm.
And I remember one time they cut commission, and I will never forget that my boss at the time looked underneath the table like he was looking at everybody's feet, and he said, "I don't see any balls and chains on any of you." So in other words, if you don't like it, there's a whole line of
Yeah.
people waiting to sit where you're sitting,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that gets your attention, and then you just have to do what you know how to do, and make it work. And so, I think I led the staff in Bears sales. I was so excited, and luckily everybody else at the station was jaded because they had been selling the Cubs advertising, and they're like, "Oh, the Bears, Cubs," I said, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, this is amazing!" So I just kind of ran through walls, and but both of our off buttons are broke. So when I was with the when I was at the Tribune, I was Mr. Tribune, and my friends will tell you when I was at GN, I was Mr. GN and
Yeah.
CLTV, and they would get sick of hearing me talk about it. And I'm the same with Diveheart. I'm kind of, this is my uniform,
It
and
is
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah, it's about adapting and it's about branding. I tell people so.
Yeah. It is. Um, Tina Marie, you mentioned you had a big family, and competition in a big family is huge. I know even just getting food, getting dinner sometimes can be difficult when you have a big family. So, was it difficult to get your voice heard, and how did you kind of speak up over the noise? Do you remember like growing up? Was that something you had to do?
Well, my immediate family isn't big, but I did grow up with I have 50 first cousins on one side,
Wow.
right? So, and we were together a lot. We
Yeah.
talk about that now. We were together a lot. So they were more like brothers and sisters than they were,
Hmm.
cousins. And so, yeah, when we were all together, but I felt I'm kind of like mid-level on one side of my family. So
Okay.
there were a couple people ahead of me and then a couple people behind me, and I'm kind of smushed in the middle. And I learned a lot from them. I remember, cousins testing me about, like, do I know all the rock groups, and do I know, who did this, and learning dance moves and doing that type of thing, playing Charlie's Angels. But I think I developed I was I no one would ever call me quiet. So I don't want, if someone heard me say I was quiet, they'd be like, "You are do not know yourself." Um, but I think I got my voice from being in my family with my cousins, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't so much that I wasn't heard, but I learned so much from them in the sense of, speak up and get your voice known, and give your opinion, that type of thing. And now everyone has to deal with me.
Yeah. It's like be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I was the only I grew up in the suburbs, and I was the only person of Hispanic heritage for a long time, until I was in 8th grade,
Yeah.
when I was in school. So I never actually realized that I was different. I mean, I realized I was different, but I thought it was so cool. I'm like, I get to go into the Pilsen neighborhood and eat, great Mexican food and go to these different things. And I always thought of it as a positive.
Yeah.
But I really didn't feel it in school until the second Hispanic person came to the school. And then all of a sudden, oh, you two are different. Right. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that was really interesting. But it's everything I've done, I feel like has helped me in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the video of like how kids don't know different until someone tells them that it's different, right? It's like they may recognize differences, but they don't think that that really matters all that much. It's just like you're different than me, but we can still play together. And so I think the lesson there is like, is, is it taught or is it learned, or, nature versus nurture or whatever the argument may be. But realistically, like kids just enjoy being kids, and they enjoy being around people, and bringing other people into that. And I think there is some value in, we were talking about networking before. There's value in just enjoying who's around you and trying to learn as much as you can from them and sharing as much of who you are with them.
I agree. There is a powerful moment in my life that I think reflects a lot now in what we do with people in Diveheart is that I remember I did something in school. I can't tell you specifically what it is, but I did something in school, and I remember someone telling me, "Well, you can't do that," and I said,
Hmm.
"But I already did." Like I'm like, you can't tell me I can't accomplish it because it's already happened. And
Yeah.
so it really hit me that a lot of the people we work with are told no. And that's not
Yeah.
a word we use in the
Okay.
people in working with people. We don't use no. We use, what can you do is what we focus on. And then when you're focused on what can you do and you don't hear the word no, there's so many things that people can accomplish that somebody else might have been like, oh, we're not even going to try.
Hmm.
But why not try? You could surprise yourself in so many ways. And it goes back to me a lot of times. I think about that moment where they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, well, I already did. So
Yeah.
I guess you're wrong. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think about that when we work with a lot of the people we work with.
Yeah, I like to say disabilities don't discriminate. They really don't care where you live and you know how much money you have or whatever. And that's how we approach things. I mean, we approach everyone the same way. And like Tina Marie said, work with their abilities and identify those and not even really focus at all on what they can't do. So
Yeah.
and that they get that message right away, and
Hmm.
it helps them kind of open up their mind to the possibilities.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that they get that message, and I'm glad that they're hearing that, because I think that's a really important one. It's really important for everyone, really. It's not just certain groups of people. Um, I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. I think we've learned some great life lessons already, and I don't want to lose people because I know we all have short attention spans on some level. So, what I'd love to do is to do a two-part episode here and kind of keep this in one part, and then keep the dive heart part in another part. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna end this first part of this episode, and we're gonna ask that you come back next week and that you listen to the second part of this episode to hear all about how Jim and Tina Marie started Dive Heart and what it means to them and what it means to the community. So be sure to come back next week to www.bridgingchicago.com to check out part two of our episode with Dive Heart.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solution Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.